Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and I didn't even think that I'd be talking about Dungeons and Dragons, ladies and gentlemen, but here we are. Now for the past few days, weeks even, if you will, there's been some rumbling, some drama in the Dungeons and Dragons community, especially regarding people who are wondering what the future of third-party content is in terms of the game. Now if you haven't known about Dungeons and Dragons, first off, I need you to find how to dig out of the rock you've been living under for the past few decades, because Dungeons & Dragons is one of the biggest tabletop role-playing experiences, period. You might have noticed this book on my desk. It's a book of Cyborg. Now, if you don't know Cyborg, ladies and gentlemen, this is part of the Morkborg tabletop systems. Effectively, it's a cyberpunk role-playing game. The art style is crazy on this, as is the work from these people. But of course, it comes with a set of rules in it that you can use to have a tabletop role-playing experience. Now, I know some people are like, but Muda, what is this tabletop nerdiness? Ladies and gentlemen, one of my earliest forms of gaming was role-playing games, JRPGs. A lot of these games that you play from old school CRPGs, computer role-playing games, have their frameworks built upon Dungeons & Dragons, built upon those tabletop role-playing experiences. The concept of leveling up, exploring, running through multiple systems to enhance your character's attributes, those are all born and bred in the world of tabletop. Hell, some of the most popular games that I'm looking forward to, like Baldur's Gate 3, are built upon those frameworks of old school tabletop role-playing games, You pretty much are built upon the roll of the die, all right? You explore, you role-play, you get the idea. Heck, some of my favorite older games like Elder Scrolls Daggerfall have a lot of basis in old school tabletop roleplay, in how combat works, how actual role-playing works, how skills work, skill checks work, you get it, okay? Heck, it wasn't only a few years ago that I actually did play 2 role-playing games with friends over online virtual tabletop simulators like Roll20, okay? This is the website I used in order to play a game of Pathfinder. Now, of course, this supports numerous actual role-playing systems. Dune, Cyberpunk, Fate, Vampire the Masquerade, but of course Dungeons & Dragons is the most important. So what is the actual beef with? Now, if you know Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, the companies that own Dungeons & Dragons, they've been working on it for a long time. Now, there's 3 licenses, as far as I understand, with D&D. There's the OGL, which is the Open Game License. There's the Content Community Agreement, the CCA, which, as far as I understand, nobody really even needs to use because it's weirdly restrictive. And you've got the FCP, which is the Fan Content Policy, which is mostly for YouTubers or people that are creating content that is supposed to be released for free. You can profit off of it with ads and Patreon and so forth, but it's meant entirely for people who are like content creators on YouTube, people releasing free content out for the world to consume. Now, the OGL, in this case, ladies and gentlemen, is the one thing that people have been using in order to actually create. So the goatsy happened when this open game license got leaked by a reporter at Gizmodo, who basically revealed that they were about to bring some changes to the OGL that was going to restrict people, especially content creators, and those that are making money in the third-party sphere. Now, to Eli 5 this, the OGL, for anybody who doesn't know what it entirely is, the open game license effectively allows independent publishers to use a basic amount of the D&D content and their rules for their own projects and products without ever paying royalties to the Wizards of the Coast company. So effectively what this means is they have created a basic framework that anybody can grab and use in their own customized versions. It's kind of like an open source game, if you will, right? The open game license. Think of it like this, okay? Imagine if Epic Games made Unreal Engine completely free, like they didn't charge you any royalties, they literally released their development software for free and said, you can use our software, our base game, to create your own projects. You don't have to pay us a dime, you don't have to do anything. The only thing is you cannot use any assets from Fortnite, from Unreal Tournament or Gears of War, if they don't even still own that IP, but you get the point. You can use Unreal Engine to produce your projects, you just can't use their actual IPs. So again, imagine if 20 years later, Epic decided to go, yeah, by the way, we're getting rid of that agreement we gave you in the past, and also you have to start paying us up, and you also have to provide us all the pay stubs and the money you're making every year. We need a thorough view of your accounting before you're ever able to proceed. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what the OGL 1.1 is bringing. It's a new document that is actually constricting the people in the third-party sphere. Look, even if Wizards of the Coast never profited from the old OGL by releasing their stuff as a framework for free. To understand, that's really important because what they did was they solidified what Dungeons and Dragons and the rules were going to be. You ever heard of the meme D20? That's not a meme, that's actually a sided die. That's how one of the basic frameworks of the D&D rules work. It's so ingrained in D&D culture and tabletop culture that people are just using it, all right? And some people don't even know where it's from. Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast, by releasing their framework for free, where they didn't directly profit off of it, they indirectly profited by creating what is the lingua franca of the entire Dungeons and Dragons world. So again, to now take that back is a wild day indeed. Now, of course, there's a few problems with this. Obviously, with the current OGL, the problem is, according to this leak at least, it seems as though the version, the original OGL, which was a perpetual worldwide non-exclusive license to that D20 system and some of the source material, under the new exact OGL 1.1, it seems like that old license is no longer an authorized agreement, no longer in force, meaning that I guess apparently this could retroactively affect people who have built brands under the original licensing agreement. And I don't know how that legally works, but there are a few lawyers on YouTube I'd recommend you watch that can explain this a lot better, who have the actual expertise. I don't see how it could work, but apparently that's a thing. The other reality is they've actually found a way to, I guess, sort of tier the people that are making money under the OGL. So for instance, if you're somebody that makes under $50,000 a year, you apparently fall under like tier 1. Now, to understand, Wizards of the Coast didn't just think of this out of their own rectum. In the past, under different clauses like the game systems license, they were trying to do effectively what they are now, allegedly, in the past. Also, the one thing that I've read too is, given the fact that these are game mechanics, these cannot directly be copyrighted because at least under the United States law, it appears like mathematics isn't technically a creative piece. So you can't actually copyright a math equation, right? Which is effectively how these game mechanics work. They're just math, all right? You're literally just doing the math in your head. You can't copyright that specific mathematics. However, copyright law is incredibly complex and it's an incredible gray area. So if you're actually going to be one of those people that says, screw the license, I'm just going to do what I do, I would highly recommend you have a competent legal team because you'd be going up against a big company like Wizards of the Coast if you were to choose to challenge them like this head on. So, according to Wizards of the Coast and this actual agreement, Wizards of the Coast is updating to the OGL 1.1 and subdividing it into commercial and non-commercial terms. A lot has changed since the old OGL was launched, absolutely. Technically, the old license had some unintended applications we needed to fix. For example, when we released OGL 1.0, YouTube apps, blockchain, crowdfunding, and now everyday technologies and distribution channels didn't exist. What they're actually talking about are PDF files, so like most rule books for D&D or custom projects aren't even published anymore. They're just sold as like actual PDF files. Even Cyborg, the actual rule book I bought, I had to pay Kickstarter in order to get this book myself, simply because this was just a PDF file that was released. You could download it if you wanted for a cheaper price. However, let's get back to it. OGL wasn't intended to fund major competitors, and it wasn't intended to allow people to make D&D apps, videos, or anything other than printed materials for use while gaming. We are updating the OGL in part to make that very clear. So obviously they want a bit of that money too. They didn't intend this to be just an open framework for people, I guess, to grab and use and produce off of. Because if you look at it, some of the largest forks for D&D have been like Pathfinders, like Paizo. Pathfinder, which is what we used, is actually a fork of like 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons, so it's wild to go in that way. Now, of course, looking at the OGL commercial license for small creators, people who wondered, who are running these third-party organizations, how is their revenue going to get affected? For most of the community content creators, those making under $750,000 per year in SRD-based content, the OGL commercial changes very little and is primarily designed to help us simply know you better. So apparently in this case, you actually have to submit your payment and all your stubs to them. And you can even read it in one of their payment terms. Royalty payments for a given year are due on or before March 31st. Please pay us on time. Please pay us fully. You must keep complete and accurate records sufficient to complete your compliance with this agreement, including the calculations of amount due for the period of 3 years of each royalty period. A lot of people have said this is insane, but if you were running a company anyways, you would keep this record just for the Internal Revenue Services anyways. So this isn't too crazy for me to read, but again, providing them all those pay stubs so they can keep the accounting on all the third parties is insanely wild to just see out of nowhere. So again, under the OGL, those creators will need to register their commercial content with us so we know what's out there. Please tell us a bit about their products and product sales, and start adding a creator product badge to their material so that everyone in the community knows they are publishing under OGL license from Wizards of the Coast. Making Dungeons & Dragons is a labor of love for us, but it's also a business. We, like you, want to keep doing what we love and pushing D&D forward. The open game license was always intended to allow the company to help grow D&D and expand it creatively. It wasn't intended to subsidize major competitors, especially now that PDF, like I said earlier, is by far the most common form of distribution. So moving forward, hugely successful businesses that generate more than 750 grand of annual revenue will also need to share some of that success with us by paying a royalty of 20 to 25% of the qualifying revenue they make in excess of $750,000. So if you make anything after 750K, you're paying them taxes on, or you're paying a tax to Wizards of the Coast alongside the tax you would have to pay to the US government, the state government, whatever government you're under. And then not only, like, that bites into the margins. Think about it like this, okay? A lot of people that are working on these projects, I can't imagine the margins are so massive for these that they can all afford a 20 to 25% hit. At the end of the day, for ultimately a little bit of money compared to how much Wizards of the Coast actually makes themselves, they're actually stifling any form of growth in these sectors as well too. Like, imagine running a company, right? Tomorrow, all of a sudden, the company who initially was telling you, hey, listen, we gave you a license that lets you use this product effectively for free. You build your business, and then all of a sudden tomorrow they retroactively go in, rip that clause up and tell you, you now have to give us 20 to 25% of your revenue if you're actually succeeding, which can absolutely bite into growth, right? Like, instead of using that 20 to 25% of money that you could have kept and spent money on, like, expanding your business, paying artists, paying people to, like, build upon the lore that you're working on. No, now you have to gut it up and pay it over to, like, to Wizards of the Coast, because again, they want to see some of that success too. And is that success really going to change their company? Is it really going to give them an influx of cash versus the bad press they're generating? No, absolutely not. It's wild to see them do this, and allegedly, if they are, remember, this is a leak, all right? So again, they could completely back on this. They could completely renege this. But given what we're seeing right now, this would not be a good OGL for the communities that have been built up. So a lot of people have mentioned companies like Critical Role, which, if you don't know, Critical Role, based on the Twitch leaks, was the largest earning Twitch channel. This is a highly produced D&D stream of professional voice actors. And effectively, if you thought Dungeons & Dragons was irrelevant, this is the largest earning stream, period, on Twitch. I think they almost raked in $10 million in like a year alone. So it's wild to see them. Now, of course, some people have wondered, do they have to pay money to Wizards of the Coast? And honestly, I can't begin to tell you. I feel like their content falls under that, fan-created content policy, which, according to Wizards of the Coast right now, based in 2017 at least, as long as you follow these rules, basically keep your content free, not paywall it. You can have ads, according to them, so you can subsidize it with advertisements, donations, sponsorships. As long as you keep the content free to access for everyone, you're fine. Tell the community it's unofficial. Obviously, don't hurt others. Don't hurt Wizards. No bad stuff. Practice safe sponsorships. Follow the law of the land. Companies like Critical Role, or rather groups like that, fan content creators, are actually going to fall under this. The only problems that are going to arise are the products and the projects that are built that those content creators use to produce content with. Ultimately, in the end, everyone is going to hurt with incredibly restrictive guidelines like this. What's happened now is an entire revolt has kicked on known as #OpenDND. Now, if you haven't been following, they've pretty much wrote an open letter. It's a letter to the open gaming license to the Wizards of the Coast. And of course, here it is. They pretty much have told you that the OGL is a legal framework that allows creators to use the rules and ideas of role-playing games in their own works. Of course, end of an open era. Wizards of the Coast has announced an updated OGL, an attempt to dismantle the entire RPG industry. I don't know if this is entirely completely open yet as the time I'm filming this video. I believe this is still a leak. Of course, hopefully Wizards of the Coast rescinds this, but we don't know. Nothing about the license is opened. It chokes the vibrant community that has flourished under the original license. No matter the creator, it locks everyone into a new contract that restricts their work, makes it mandatory to report their projects and revenues to Wizards of the Coast, and gives Wizards of the Coast the legal right to reproduce and resell the creator's content. Now, this is where, like, it's one of those things where it's legal for them to do, but it's also douchey as hell. If you're already going to pay, you're going to charge people taxes on this anyways. Then you're going to take their fan creations, you're going to reinsert them into your own lineup and just sell them if you want. That is one of the wildest things I've seen. So, of course, he even mentioned the 25% tax, which based on their total sales above 750K, not profit, by the way, that is total revenue. Again, profit and revenue in a business are totally different things. Sometimes the margins are so small that nobody can afford that 25% cut. That is anti-competitive, monopolistic behavior designed to crush small businesses that collectively employ hundreds of designers, writers, and artists. Under this tax, it becomes impossible for creators to put books on game store shelves or run Kickstarters for large audiences. Remember, even money you make through a Kickstarter is subject to that 750K cap. Furthermore, under the new license, virtual tabletops cannot operate. So again, they can no longer support OGL systems, and the creator can no longer release modules and adventures on popular digital platforms, such as Foundry, Alchemy, or Shard. I wonder if things like Roll20 will eliminate D&D from their pool if this is going to go. Again, why is this super important? It's because if you're a gamer, Dungeons & Dragons has a lot of history in terms of everyone's gaming repertoire. You know, this is one of those old school gaming pillars that like has affected modern video gaming even to this day. And especially for me personally, while I'm not the biggest D&D player in the world, I don't have that much time to separate and play D&D campaigns with friends. We don't have that much time to meet up even with the online tools that we have. At the end of the day, this matters because we are all gamers and we're working together. Look, if it could happen to the Dungeons & Dragons people, it could happen to anybody in the video game camp that's producing third-party content. Imagine if all of a sudden, you know, if you had companies like Microsoft, who pretty much allowed people to produce Halo content, albeit for free, decided the next day they were going to restrict content or do something else under different licensing agreements, we'd all be at square one. Look, at the end of the day, we're all gamers. We're all in the pool together. So I'm going to sit here and stand by with the people who are in the Dungeons & Dragons community. Because at the end of the day, you can't just give people this one licensing agreement they've had for decades and all of a sudden just completely rescind it because you want a little bit of that pie. That little bit of pie for Wizards of the Coast means nothing compared to the fan backlash. And it means even less considering the fact that you're stifling the actual works of the people keeping your brand relevant. It's wild to think in this same document they said this was never intended to foster competition. You literally benefited so hard from having people use you as a lingua franca for Dungeons & Dragons, and now you want to take it back? Get out of here. Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.